listening to The Magnetic Coach, a podcast for those who want to stand out, be seen, and communicate with clarity and confidence. I'm your host, Linda Ford. Let's dive in. Hello, and welcome back to the Magnetic Coach podcast. Good to have you join me again. And today we're going to talk about an epidemic. We've all, not the one that we've just had for the last few years, but there is another epidemic that just never seems to dissipate. It's something that's been going on for a long time. And it's all about women feeling insecure, this epidemic of brilliant women, talented women who still feel insecure no matter what they do, no matter how many classes they take. There's this epidemic of women hiding out and playing small. And essentially, it's an epidemic of women not feeling confident with themselves. And of course, because I work with coaches a lot, I see this manifest a lot in this particular profession. You know, there's so many amazing coaches. And a lot of them are like the quiet ones, you know, they've had fantastic coach training and they love what they do. And some of them do very deep work. And then when it comes to putting themselves out there, that's when they put the brakes on. And this is the subject that you hang around this podcast long enough, this is what we talk about. We talk about what is that handbrake that they put on and why does it come on? And why is it coming on especially hard for women? So today we're going to talk about this epidemic of insecurity. And, you know, I was doing a search on Amazon.com, and there's over 60,000 books written on this subject of confidence, right? It's pretty amazing. How to get it, how to feel confident, because it's actually one of those traits that we really want to have, right? Everybody wants to feel confident. Everybody needs to feel confident in their work. If we're not confident in our work or in our relationships, then that can severely impact how we show up in the world. So we all need it. We all want it. It's one of those traits that we all wish we had. And so I want to dig a little bit deeper and figure out what's going on here. What is confidence? And so that's the direction I want to go in today. Because I suffered from what I thought was a lack of confidence most of my life, especially where it pertains to my work, to my career. And it really began to show up big time when I started my coaching business, when it came to the selling part of me. And the interesting thing is that throughout my career, I've had various jobs selling things. Like I used to sell artwork when I lived in New York City, and I did really well at it. And then I went on and I had a part-time job one time when I moved to Montana with my husband, and I was selling antique Persian rugs, very high priced to all the wealthy people who lived in Big Sky. And I did well at that. But when it came to me setting up my own business and essentially selling my own services, or selling me, right? That's when the brakes came on. And so I got really curious what's going on here. So yeah, 60,000 books on Amazon.com, and they still keep coming, these books. And yet people are still feeling huge amounts of imposter syndrome and insecurity. People are still, women especially, coaches, are still holding themselves back from putting themselves out there. They're afraid to speak about what they do. They have a lot of fear about social media. And so clearly something is not working. The advice that these books are giving, it's not that they're not helping, because they do help. I bought a lot of those books many years ago, and a lot of the tactics and the strategies and the tools that they advise, they actually did help, but only up to a point. And at best, what I was getting was just some really good coping and managing skills. And the problem is that it didn't go deep enough. The advice didn't go deep enough. And I believe the advice didn't go deep enough because they weren't fully, because we as a society, as a culture, as human beings, we haven't really understood what confidence is and where it comes from. And so that's one of the big myths that I want to kind of clear up today, or at least tell you what has been my experience, because ultimately that's all I can do is how did this insecure woman of 50 odd years, right? I'm in my 60s now, of 50 odd years, just always be suffering with insecurity and imposter syndrome in her work. And why didn't any of these books really get to the bottom of that? And then I came across an understanding about 7 years ago that really just changed all of that for me. So I have gone from being that insecure woman, always hiding out, never wanting to speak up in meetings, to someone who is quite happy to do interviews and speak on my own podcast and do videos and put myself out there in social media. What happened, So that's what I want to share with you today, at least partly, because it's a big topic. And I'm going to share just a little bit of that, of what I experienced anyway. So let's just clear up that. Let's just define what confidence is first, because I think we've got this, some of us at least, are probably thinking, oh, if you're confident, you're extroverted, it's the flashy ego out there, just kind of, exuberance. But that's kind of, maybe that is your version of confidence. If it is, fine, that's great. But most of that is just kind of like ego. And just kind of pretending that you're a certain way. But the confidence that I'm talking about is where you can show up and just be unapologetically yourself, feel comfortable in your own skin, whether even if you show up eloquent or you put your foot in your mouth and you just say something odd or weird, you're still okay with who you are. And that's a beautiful place to be, if you can just float through the world like that, right? You don't have to be perfect. Of course, you want to make a good impression and you want to show up professionally. But if for some reason you've got that spinach in your teeth, or you just kind of, are at a loss for words, you can just admit it and show up and be okay with it. And for me, that is true confidence right there. It's just, unapologetically yourself. And it's just a lovely place to land, to find yourself in, because it's a lot stress-free as well. Now, I used to think, and most people do, that what really makes you confident is your competencies. It's like the degrees that you have, the accolades you get, or even just the experience of putting yourself out there and giving talks. It's becoming an expert in what you do. And I would just like to say that, yes, that is actually part of being confident, because it's nice to be prepared. It's nice to know your subject well. But there's a difference between knowing something intellectually, whatever it is you do in your work, and really being able to embody that information. Because guess what? Academia is full of imposters. It's a really big problem in academia. You've got people there who've studied, they know their work, their craft, their area of expertise, but they dread having to get on a stage and give a presentation, which they are called to do many times, right? So it doesn't necessarily translate that the more competent or the more degrees you get, or the more you know your topic, whatever it is you're talking about, or being an expert in, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to feel confident. It's quite the opposite. So just keep that in mind, because it doesn't give the full picture. But I want to come back to the competencies also, because they do play a part, and I want to make sure that we do cover that. But I think most of us grow up, we come into this culture, and this was very much my case, thinking that, some people are born with confidence and some people aren't. And I grew up believing this. I grew up pretty much believing that I was missing a lot of things that most people had. And confidence was one of them. That when it came time for me, the confidence was being given out at the time of birth, I didn't get much of it. And it was clear to me that there were some people who were just more confident, more expressive, more fully out there than I was. And so I grew up, like most people do, thinking there's something I'm missing and I have to go outside of myself to get it. I'm going to have to, work at this confidence. And of course, when we read the confident books today, it's all about improving the confidence muscle, working the muscle, just in the same way that you work a muscle in your arms, your biceps, or your legs, or whatever. The more you work it, the more confident you're going to feel. And yes, there is some truth to that, because the more you do put yourself out there and the more speaking engagements you do have, you do find that it helps. But there's more to it than that, because clearly it's not working all the time. So I grew up really thinking that, there's something I have to add to myself. But here's the odd thing. As much as I believed that those books on confidence were going to give me some tools and strategies to feel confident, and maybe they'd work a little bit, right? Here's the odd thing, and I want you to really think about this. There were times in my life, if I look back on my life, where confidence was there. Even if it was just for a moment, I would feel confident. And I was just thinking, well, okay, well, if there were those moments, as isolated as they were, maybe, and I used to notice it a lot in my work as when I was teaching in college. Like if there were those moments, where did they come from? What was that all about? And why didn't it last? Was it a case of just the fact that I got out of bed the right side, or the stars were aligned, or, it's just, it seemed like a fluke. And so I just began to get curious about that fluke, that it was there. And sometimes I'll give you an example. I would walk into my class at university, and every single time, I can guarantee you, I would feel nervous walking in there, because you've got a sea of 30 faces looking at you, like you're on show. When you're a professor, you really do feel like you're on show. And I always thought I'm going to have to perform well, right? And so I always had that knot in my stomach when I was going in there, just feeling, just get me out of here, And then I would get into the class, and we'd be having a halfway through the discussions, having a really good rapport and discussion, reading some poetry or something in the literature. And I would just find myself settling down into it, relaxing into it, and saying something that just really surprised me. It's like, oh, where did that come from, you know? And I'd walk out of that class feeling confident, feeling like I had just touched a part of myself that I hadn't touched in many years. And as I look back now, the beauty of hindsight, I can see that really what was going on is that my mind was just settling down. You know, my mind, which was always full of, you're insecure, you're an imposter, somebody's going to catch you one day and you're going to be found out and you're not going to survive this, you know. All of that kind of thinking just kind of somehow or other settled down. And then so I was able to connect with the real me, the me that was just relaxed and connected and calm and confident. And so I can see this, how it played out in many areas of my life. Like I would, when I was in graduate school, I would be, you know, enthusiastically, confidently sharing some idea for a thesis with a fellow student, and I'd be, you know, confident about it, and then I'd have to go and present that to my professor, and I would just feel immediately like I was back in 5th grade. So there was something that was coming in that was preventing me from being that relaxed self, right? That relaxed, connected self. Being relaxed and connected to my work, the work that I loved back then. And so I want you to just kind of get curious about noticing that if you have labeled yourself as insecure or introverted, just kind of think back times when your confidence came out, even if it was for a second, and to not really see it as a fluke, but to begin to see it that, wow, that was a moment where I was really my true self, where confidence, that I was tapping into my confidence. And if you haven't guessed what I'm trying to get at here by now, it's that what I'm trying to say is the myth that I'm trying to get across here is that this whole myth that we have to work at our confidence, that confidence is something on the outside that we get. No, it's not. It's already there. It's innate. It's an innate quality that all of us have. I mean, if you just look at a newborn baby and little toddlers, they are fully confident, right? Fully confident, even though they've got no hair, no teeth, and you know, they poop in their diapers and they dribble food all over them. The confidence of being is there. And then we end up going to school and the ego kicks in and we start forming these identities, these personalities, and we suddenly find ourselves separated from that natural confidence. So what I'm trying to express here, and what I'd like you just to consider, you don't have to believe it, but just consider, what if confidence was already there within you? And what if it was just, you know, the thing that was covering it up was just a lot of busy, habitual thinking that you've had your whole life. And we have developed this habit of thinking that we are a certain way. Oh, I could never do that. You know, that have the personality to do that. So if we could just consider, just think about the fact, what if that is all made up? And we've just trained ourselves, innocently trained ourselves to think in a certain way about ourselves, and to let that go. Now, here's the thing, and this is what I want to finish with on this podcast, because we're going to talk about this subject on and on and on throughout this podcast, but I want to finish here, and I just want to throw something out. There's a lot of people who hear this and think, oh, great, I have innate confidence. Yeah, I believe that, you know. But if I was to put a microphone, and I'm talking about coaches, because this is what this podcast is about, right? How to be a more magnetic coach. I hear a lot of coaches say, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, that it is innate, and it's my true nature. But if I was to place a microphone under your nose and have you talk about what you do or some aspect of your work, invariably most people would shy away. Intellectually, we like the idea that confidence is there and it's just, being covered over with a lot of busy thinking. And so how do you go from having that intellectual understanding to really embodying this confidence? And so that is the big question, isn't it? And I can only answer that from my own experience, is that when I heard that confidence was innate, that I actually hadn't missed out on anything, that it had been there all along and it was just covered over. I wanted to really put that to the test. I love the idea of that. When I heard that, I heard, how it is, it felt like I heard the truth of who I really am. And when you hear the truth of who you really are, it resonates deeply with you, right? It's like, oh yeah, that sounds like the truth, because it is the truth. And I remember hearing it and feeling, having the hairs on my back, on my neck stand up, that you get goosebumps. But it wasn't as if I suddenly went out the next day and was unabashedly confident. It didn't quite work that way. Because, why would it? We've had years, and in my case, decades of conditioning that told me the opposite. So I'm not just, I can hear the truth and it can resonate, but it's not gonna just, I'm not gonna walk out of my, just suddenly wake up one morning and have all that gone. But I wanted to hold on to that truth. And I realized that what I had to do was I had to put it to the test by putting myself out there and preparing myself to put myself out there. And so this is why the phrase that you will hear again and again from me is where soul meets strategy. So there's the soulful recognition of who we really are, right? The truth of who we really are. That's a soulful experience. And then there's the strategic part where, okay, if I do have those qualities to show up confident, there are, like, if I need to give a talk or if I need to do a video, then let me prepare that. Let me do my preparation for that. Let me do that work, right? So that I can put myself out there. So it's where those two worlds collide. But if you're just thinking, oh, I like the sound of this, it's a very soulful, truthful idea, and you don't have any strategy, if you're not developing skills, good presentation skills, if you're not really doing that work that is required, then the soulful bit, it just doesn't work on its own. And if you're just all strategy and you're putting together a great presentation, but you're not believing that you have that soulful, you have the capability to show up confident, then that doesn't work either. But when you put the two together, you've got a magical combination. And I think that's what this world is asking of us. Yes, to know that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. And we want to tap into that soulful, spiritual side of us that is complete. The confidence is there, the eloquence is there, the creativity is there. But let's do our own work as well. Let's do the work of preparing, of getting our ideas clear, and then put ourselves out there and see what happens. And that's what I did. That's the journey that I have been on for the last 4 or 5 years. And the first time I did it, the first time I did a video, the first time I gave an interview, I was terrified and it was kind of awkward, but I did it. And the more that I did it, the more it's not that I grew the confidence muscle, but I allowed the layers of insecurity to fall away. That's what it was. It's allowing, we're not growing any muscle, but we are letting those layers just fall away until the real you emerges, the real confident you can emerge. So I want to leave that with you today, just to think about that. Just look back on your life and just consider, yes, you did have moments of confidence. And where did that come from? Was it a fluke? I don't think so. I think maybe, just consider anyway, that was your true self trying to come through, right? Whether it was at work, you were giving a presentation, or maybe it was when you were in the school play, that was trying to break through the clouds, right? That real you. And that's what it was. So pay attention to those moments and don't overlook them. Don't see them as a fluke, and just consider that, wow, I actually am confident, and I've been confident all my life, if not for all this busyness that goes on, all the way we've trained our brain to think about ourselves. Okay, guys, that's it for today. Please subscribe. I think it's on that side. It's all mixed. Wherever you see the subscribe button, to my podcast, to my YouTube channel, because if you're watching the video, this is on my YouTube channel. And if you are just listening to the podcast, please, I would be so delighted if you could give me a 5-star review, even though I've only had a few sessions here, but I like what I'm presenting here. I think it's going to help a lot of coaches. So I would love your feedback and your comments. And I look forward to hearing from you. Here's to your confident life.